Hi, I'm Izzy, and today I'm joined with Grace, who is the founder of Hardy Accounting. We're going to hear about her journey there, from apprenticeship to entrepreneurship and owning her own company. So listen more to find out about how she's done that. So Grace, please introduce yourself.
I'm Grace Hardy, and I did an apprenticeship out of sixth form at 18. After I completed it, I then left and started my own business, Hardy Accounting, and now I'm just watching that grow.
Amazing. And how many years was it since you started your apprenticeship?
3 now, nearly 4.
Okay, and what kind of was your journey to do an apprenticeship? Who told you about them? Why did you want to do one, and what was that whole process like?
So for me, I always knew that I didn't want to go to university, mostly because of my dyslexia. I really struggle reading, writing, all the basic things that you need.
Yeah.
So I really struggled with that, so I knew that university is not a place that I would necessarily thrive in, and listening, taking notes is basically my worst nightmare. And so I knew I didn't want to go, but I didn't know any other options. At my school, it was basically university or nothing.
Yeah.
And my mum was like, you need to get a different qualification. Doesn't matter what it is. And at the time, she was a training provider for an apprenticeship in the NHS. And she went, have you thought of an apprenticeship? Very naively, at 17 years old, I went, oh, you can only do that in construction and hairdressing. Like, you can't do it in anything I want to do. And she was like, don't be so stupid. She was like, go do some research and come back to me. So I went away, and at A-level I really loved economics. And there was one economics apprenticeship at the time. It was in the government. Okay. And I got all the way to the assessment centre, but you had to write a timed essay. Oh. So obviously I didn't get the apprenticeship. And so I thought, right, what's close to economics? Immediately went to tax and then started applying for all these tax apprenticeships. They were all getting filled up because I applied way too late, probably in May, June time for the following September. And then they moved it to an accounting and finance apprenticeship. And then I got it.
Amazing. So how many do you think you applied for in total?
Do you know what? Not that many, probably 5 or 6.
Okay. And you made it to the final stage. And how was the process for the one that you accepted? Like, how did you find that?
It was weird. So it's during COVID. So everything was online. So all of the assessment centres I did were all online, which was quite weird.
Yeah.
So I'd be wearing trackies on the bottom, shirt on top. And then it was basically you sat in a room and then you got put into breakout rooms for all your little projects and stuff, and then you'd have an interview with one of the partners or directors at the end of the day, and that was usually how it worked. Yeah. But it's a bit weird because it's quite difficult to butt in on projects because you don't know when other people are going to speak and you don't want to speak over them. So it was quite a weird environment to do it in.
So the first day that you went into the office, was that your first time ever experiencing it?
Yeah.
So you'd never been in there before. And how did you find that? Because I think a lot of young people that we speak to find the whole virtual thing quite unnerving, and then their first day is going to be the first time they're in an office. How did you find that experience?
It was so daunting, and I think as a girl I was like, what do I wear?
Yeah.
I was like, because you don't want to dress up too much in a matching suit. Yeah. But also you don't want to show up probably in this. Yeah. Not been acceptable. And so it's trying to find a middle ground, and it's also, I didn't have very many other apprentices when I joined, and so it was also an age gap thing and trying to relate to people because all the rest of them were graduates, so they had gone through 3-4 years of uni, and then this was their grad scheme, whereas I was freshly 18. A month or 2 before, and being chucked into a workplace. So it was quite daunting.
Yeah, and what did your school say about the whole thing?
So I didn't get a lot of support from my sixth form at the time. I remember going to the careers advisor and was like, what level apprenticeship should I be doing? And he turned around and he went, there are levels. And at that point I knew they didn't have the resources to help me. But a lot of my teachers were really, really supportive of the fact that I was doing an apprenticeship. And some of them were like, this is it for you. You're going to really thrive. And they were so nice and positive about it. But because not many people had been through an apprenticeship scheme, it was difficult to help me during the journey.
Yeah. And you said about your dyslexia being the reason you didn't want to go to university. What was that like for you during school? Because obviously exams and things, how did you cope with that side of it?
So it wasn't easy. It was really difficult. And I had teachers tell me throughout my whole school experience I was stupid and I was dumb and I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that. Yeah. And it puts a lot of limiting beliefs on you when you're going through life, especially from such a young age. I was just told, well, you can't read and you're really terrible at writing. I remember doing English and being like, well, you're going to get a C or a D and you just got to live with that. Yeah. There was no, if you do X, Y, Z, or have you thought of this software or have you tried that? It was just this is your situation, deal with it.
Yeah. And have you found that approach has changed in the future? Have you found ways to deal with that or?
So I'm very lucky in the fact that now, because I run my own business, I can do things in a way that suit me.
Yeah.
So during sixth form, I was quite a terrible student in the fact that I didn't really go in. But I didn't go in because I'd asked for the work and then work at home, because I could teach myself in a way that I understood that teachers couldn't. And they were so understanding of that, and they were so supportive. They were like, well, your grades are fine. Like, we know you're working. You're not just slacking off.
Yeah.
But running your own business, you can work in a way that suits you.
Yeah. So when you left your apprenticeship, why did you leave? And two, what have you gone on to do since then?
So I decided to leave just because at the time I really wanted to travel. Yeah. Because I didn't take a gap year. I just went from sixth form to job to working 9 to 5 to doing all my accountancy exams. And that's a lot to handle when you're a teenager, essentially. And so I was like, really want to travel. So I wanted to do Southeast Asia and go to Bali and find myself and like sit under a waterfall and like get nice Instagram pictures. But at the time when I wanted to do it, it was rainy season. So I was like, okay, I need to wait like 3 months. What am I going to do in the meantime? I worked in hospitality and retail, and I didn't really want to go back to that. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm a qualified accountant. Why don't I just start a firm and see what happens?
See how it goes, yeah.
Yeah.
So how has that been for you? Like, it must have been really scary doing that. And what's been the hardest part of it, I guess?
I think it wasn't as scary because I had zero expectations.
Yeah.
Like, I thought it wouldn't work, and then I could go to Bali in January, February and live my best life and like drink out of a coconut.
Yeah.
But it got to the point in January where it was going well, and I was like getting opportunities to like speak during National Apprenticeship Week and all that sort of stuff, which was absolutely amazing. And so I was like, right, Bali can wait for now. But I think the hardest part is mindset, really.
Yeah.
Because to transition from corporate, where you're taught to be the same as everyone else and just fit in, and you're praised for that, and that's great. And like, don't really think outside of the box, just do what you're doing and do it well. Whereas when you run your own business, you have to think outside of the box all the time.
Yeah.
Like, especially in the accountancy space, there are so many accountants. You sort of have to think, right, well, what makes me stand out? Anyone could pick any accountant. Why are they going to pick me?
Yeah.
And so switching that mentality to thinking outside of the box and like what sets you apart and being different is quite scary.
And what is your why? Are you different? Like, what would you say to people?
My USP is that I'm young, and that I'm a young female in business, like in finance. And if you think of an accountant, you're probably thinking of an old white man in a dreary suit with like a bald patch in the middle of his head. So when people think of an accountant, they don't necessarily think of someone that looks like me. Yeah. And I really hated that at the beginning. So for the first 2 months of my business, I didn't post my face on social media because I was so scared of the backlash, because I thought everyone would look at it, they go, she's female, she's young, she doesn't know anything, she doesn't have any experience. Scroll and move on.
And have you found that's been a perception of you, like when you're at like networking events and things? Have you found that quite difficult?
It's been really rough.
Yeah.
Like, I will go to a networking event and I will dress up in a suit very formally. I wouldn't go in something like this because I wouldn't be taken seriously. But I'll still go, and people will mistake me for someone's PA or someone's girlfriend.
Wow.
Or I had it once where someone was like, could you grab your director, your CEO for me? And I'd like seen it on some
CEO.
TV show, and I just turned around and I went, it's me.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh. And I was like, I'll move on then.
Yeah, because I remember when I saw you on the panel at the Apprenticeship Ambassador Network conference, and when you said you had your own firm, I think there was like a gasp in the room, because it's just so amazing, and you don't really hear of people doing that. And I also think, like, I left my apprenticeship out of choice as well, and I think people think that you maybe didn't succeed because you left. Like, people stay there for many years. So have you had that backlash as well? Like, well, if you loved your apprenticeship and you're talking about them so much, why didn't you just stay there? Because I've had that quite a bit.
Do you know what? Not as much. It's more the backlash of like, why are you doing this now?
Okay.
Sort of thing. But people have said that, and it's like, my apprenticeship was so amazing. Like, I loved it, and it's given me all the skills I have now. Yeah. But working in a 9 to 5 from a very young age, it does get boring. And like the pathway I was on, you move up, you get more responsibility. But at the same time, nothing changes. It's quite the same.
Yes.
And I wanted change. And like, I love what I do now because every day is different.
Yeah. And people might want that, structure. But if you don't want that, then it's something you can, strive to change. And I think one thing about your story is not many people would see kind of the apprenticeship and the qualification and then think, I can now go up and set my own firm up. So what would you say to young people that might be about to start their apprenticeship, doing the same course as you, that might have those goals?
I think do your research. It wasn't until the last few months of my apprenticeship that I realised I could set up by myself.
Yeah.
The entire way through the apprenticeship, I had no idea. And then it was just because I did some research into my qualification, because I did some exams, and a notification popped up being like, you can now apply for this license. And I was like, oh, what license? And it was to be a qualified bookkeeper. And if I had done the exams that I then did following that, I'm now a qualified accountant.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise that. So it's just research and like, look at what your qualification brings you.
Yeah. And also it proves that you're not trapped in a contract or anything like that. Like, you can leave afterwards. And what would you say has been the key to making your business so successful?
I think it is just being relatable.
Okay.
So when I started posting on social media, if you scroll back through my Instagram, it's ugly, first of all. And the content's terrible. So it's stuff that I was talking about finance and accounting into higher level.
Okay.
Stuff that people don't care about.
Yeah.
So it's like payments on account, and people are like, oh, I don't know what that is. I'm not interested. I don't think it applies to me. And they scroll past and they don't interact in it.
Okay.
When I stripped it right back to basics, like what the tax brackets, what are dividend allowances, how to know if you need to fill in a self-assessment, things that people actually need, then it did well. And it's the same on TikTok. Like, I did a lot of ego posting at the beginning, which is like when you do like days in the lives and like get ready with me.
Yeah.
And then I realised, Grace, no one actually cares what you do in a day.
Yeah.
They care about how they can save money, how they can invest,
Yes.
how can they use their salary, how can they budget, all that sort of stuff. When I started posting that, then it did so much better.
So what platform do you see kind of most of your return coming on, or what's your favourite platform?
So TikTok and I have a very love-hate relationship.
Okay.
In the fact that I get 90% of my clients through TikTok.
Wow.
Which is amazing. But it's also the platform I get the most hate on.
Yeah.
So
Really?
you win some, you lose some. But I don't really give a bleep about the hate, because it's all young boys. If you have a look, it's actually quite interesting to read the comments.
Wow.
Because it's all young males or really old males, either one, going, you don't have experience, I wouldn't trust you, it's daddy's money, it's this, it's that.
Okay.
And you just go, well, thank you for boosting my engagement.
Yeah, exactly that.
Love you so much.
Yeah. The more comments, the engagement. And I know you do a lot on LinkedIn, and a lot of young people are kind of coming onto LinkedIn now as a professional platform. What would you say are the benefits to that, and what advice would you give to them really on how to build it?
So I always thought LinkedIn was for old people.
Yeah.
So I didn't start on there for a long time. I think I probably started posting probably like maybe January, February,
Okay.
March, like consistently. And for me, LinkedIn is like so many opportunities. Like their AAN came through
Yes.
LinkedIn, and like loads of amazing speaking experiences come through LinkedIn. Clients, not necessarily, because my clients aren't there.
Yeah.
Which is fine. But those like speaking opportunities are amazing. Podcast opportunities all come through LinkedIn. And I think it's just about posting consistently,
Yeah.
but finding something that works for you. Like I talk about, well, pretty much everything on there. But like financial education, my journey into an apprenticeship, pros and cons of being a business owner, things like that.
Yeah.
And I use my content pillars, and that's how I like decide what to post.
Yeah.
But it's so valuable.
Yeah, and I think it's a huge thing that schools are now kind of jumping onto as well, and getting people to build a professional profile on LinkedIn. So I know obviously you speak to a lot of young people. What advice would you give to someone that might be in a similar position to you were at school? You know, they're thinking about apprenticeships, they're thinking about their next steps. What would you say to them?
I'd say do your research. Because it's really important that you find a company that also aligns with your values.
Yeah.
Because it's great to apply for loads of big companies, and like when I was picking my apprenticeship, it was between KPMG or Mazars.
Okay.
And so one of my family friends had gone to KPMG. He had dyslexia. He didn't have the best experience because of that. And so that made my choice easier. I went, well, Mazars has a really nice people culture. There's a lot more support for my dyslexia. So I went with them. It's not necessarily having the big name on your CV.
Yeah.
Mazars are still massive, but they're not the big four.
Yeah.
But for me, it was making sure that I was being taken care of and being in an environment and a company that suited me.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, and what we're telling a lot of the students and young people is, you know, think about their values. Do they match with what you want to do? Do you feel comfortable in the environment as well? It's super, super important. So where can people find you? Where can they hear about you? What are you up to at the moment?
Well, I'm everywhere, always, all the time. So on LinkedIn, it's obviously just Grace Hardy.
Yeah.
And then on Instagram, the business is called Hardy Accounting.
Yeah.
My personal brand is Hardy Grace_Hardy_. And on TikTok, it's hardy.accounting.
Amazing. And you've got a podcast?
Launching very soon, which is very exciting,
Amazing.
called The Unconventional Podcast.
Cool. And what kind of things are you going to be talking about on that?
So we're going to be talking a little bit about apprenticeships, different paths in life, obviously, and starting your own business and financial education.
Cool, which I think is super important, especially financial education, because schools don't do enough of it. Do you go back into schools at all and talk about that?
I do, yeah, which is amazing, and I love it. But especially as a business owner, all my clients have this. So they've all started their business because they're so passionate about it, which is so nice to see. And I couldn't do any of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But because they're not taught financial education in school, they're like, well, I don't know the first thing about finances or tax. And then they're like, oh my God, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
So it's speaking to business owners, because at the end of the day, like, finance is boring. Like, it's a dull subject to talk about and try teach. So with the podcast, I wanted to get business owners on, them talk about their journey.
Okay.
Slip a couple of finance questions in there, like, what do you wish you were taught at school?
Yeah.
Or what's a financial challenge that you've had? And so people can learn about it that way, which is a bit more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really, key that people listen to it and talk about it. And so when are you hoping to launch that?
28th of June, hopefully.
Okay, cool. So, Grace, tell us a bit more about how you secured your first clients.
So my first client was through word of mouth. So I lived with my aunt in London, and she was telling all her art friends. So I got to do a couple of their self-assessments, and one of their friends owned a fashion store in Soho. And they were like, hey, we heard that you're doing accounts, we really need an accountant. So I went into Soho and met them, and that's how I got my first client. Wow. And from there, that was when I wasn't posting myself on social media. Then I started posting myself on social media, and a video did really well, all about HMRC's new tax legislation. And then from there, I had loads of inquiries through my website, and that's how I started to gain more and more clients.
Cool. And what's the next step for that? Are you just going to keep building, keep going, get on that flight to Bali?
Pretty much. So I'm trying to set my business up 100% remotely. It's about 80% of the way there.
Okay.
And I have a friend who runs her business as a digital nomad. So we went away for a week in Tenerife to learn how to do it. Because I think jumping from not being remote to a month in Bali, it's quite a big gap. Yeah. So I'm starting to do weeks away at a time to understand how to do it remotely, and then I'll be off to Bali.
Yeah. And what's the setup of that? Like, what steps do you have to take?
So that's what I'm learning at the moment. So all of my bookkeeping and tax software is all remote. So all my clients are linked up to it, and their bank statements and bank run through it, which is fine. That's all remote. I have a couple of clients that I see in person. Yeah. So that's transitioning to video calls, etc. Okay. And making sure that's all online.
Yeah. And one question that I really want to know is, talking about financial education, what is one thing that everyone should be doing that you don't think enough people are?
Budgeting.
Okay.
I think it sounds boring, but budgeting is so powerful. Yeah. And especially personal budgeting. And now I've learned about business budgeting as well. And I think it's so crucial to as a foundation for everything, because you can't save if you don't have any money because you're spending it all. Yeah. So if you budget, you can budget into savings and investments, and that's a really good way to start.
Yeah. And with the whole investing side of it, where do people start with that? Because I think it's a bit of a minefield.
It is a minefield. So I would start really, really basic. Okay. So I have a high interest savings account. Okay. So that's got an interest of maybe 5%. So I put money in there that I know I'll need for the next year. Okay. Anything else above a year goes into an ISA, stocks and shares ISA. Yeah. I personally use Vanguard as a platform for that. And I just put lump sums or monthly amounts into that and just leave it there, because if I don't need it, it can just sit and grow.
Yeah. And do you think investing is the key to growing your wealth?
It is, because I think compound interest is so powerful. Yeah. And it's something that I wish was taught in schools, because the earlier you start, the more growth you'll have.
Yeah. And you do compound interest in maths, but they never actually link it to a normal situation.
And if they did, everyone would be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah. But you're sat in maths going, this is really boring.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I 100% agree. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to talk to you and hear about your journey. And we'll link everything below in terms of socials and things. But thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.